Hello everyone and welcome. Imagine waking up in a world where justice isn't blind, it's bloodthirsty. Where the scales of justice are tipped not by evidence, but by the weight of the executioner's axe. Welcome to the annals of history, where the concept of cruel and unusual punishment was not a cautionary tale but a daily reality. In this journey, we'll traverse time and geography to uncover the most harrowing methods of legal retribution, ever sanctioned by society. Brace yourself, the past is not for the faint of heart. Before we dive in, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's begin. You are naked, afraid, and floating in a boat, but not in the relaxing, wine at sunset kind of way. No, you've been nailed between two shallow canoes, face up, your limbs protruding awkwardly from the sides like the world's most pathetic figurehead. Welcome to Scaphism, the Persian Empire's answer to how can we make death last for weeks and involve the maximum number of insects. It starts innocently enough. A bit of honey, a touch of milk, poured directly into your mouth. Sounds sweet, right? Except they keep going. Honey is smeared all over your exposed skin. Milk dribbled down your throat even as you gag. You're not being fed, you're being transformed into bait. The goal is simple, turn you into a living buffet for every insect within a 5-mile radius. Flies arrive first. Always do. They sniff out your sticky limbs and lay eggs. Soon your flesh bubbles with larvae. Ants climb in the cracks where your skin folds. Mosquitoes. They don't even wait for permission. And bees, wasps, maggots. This is their spa day. Your eyes water as a beetle explores your nostril. You scream. No one hears. Or worse, they do, and they find it entertaining. Because this isn't just punishment. This is performance. The Persians didn't invent cruelty, but they certainly refined it with bureaucratic flair. Scaphism was reserved for traitors and blasphemers, people whose suffering needed to be both instructive and unforgettable. You weren't simply executed, you were displayed, slowly devoured over days or even weeks, until you were less human than hive. Dehydration sets in, but they don't let you die. Each day, they return to force more milk and honey down your throat, ensuring a steady supply of diarrhea to pull beneath you. This isn't an oversight. It's part of the system. Your excrement collects beneath your body, soaking into the bottom of the boat, mixing with sweat, rot, and liquefying skin. It attracts a second wave of insects, dung beetles, worms, creatures that normally stay beneath rocks but now burrow into you. You cry out again. No one saves you. You begin to hallucinate. Fever dreams twist your world. The sky bends. The sun stares. Time slows. Your own body becomes unrecognizable, an ecosystem of pain. The line between you and your parasites blurs. You are food now. You are soil. The records say the Greek soldier Mithridates survived 17 days. In Scaphism, 17. That's more than 2 weeks of skin rot, sepsis, and insect digestion while still technically alive. His crime? Allegedly killing Cyrus the Younger, a royal whose death embarrassed the Persian king. That's all it took. A royal grudge, a legal decree, and suddenly you're soup in a wooden sandwich. Eventually, the heart gives out. Or maybe the brain escapes into madness first and the body follows. Either way, the end is less a moment than a collapse. They open the boats, days later, to reveal what's left. Often, it's not even a body, just something unformed, crawling, consumed. The remains are discarded. No burial, no rites. Just one more smear of horror along the riverbank. Congratulations. You've just endured one of the worst punishments in ancient legal history. Your legacy being a warning displeased the wrong king, and you won't just die. You'll rot in real time for the pleasure of the state. You committed treason. Or maybe someone just said you did. It's hard to tell in medieval England, where the legal system has all the accuracy of a drunk archer and about the same interest in fairness. What matters is this: you've been sentenced to the most elaborate, unnecessarily theatrical, and grotesquely creative punishment ever formalized by a crown-wearing sociopath. You are to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. It sounds like a cooking recipe written by a lunatic. It is not. It is your future. First, you are drawn, no, not sketched by a whimsical artist. Drawn means dragged. You're tied to a wooden hurdle and hauled through the mud behind a horse. The journey from your prison to the execution site is humiliating and slow. Crowds jeer. Children throw things. Bits of waste, if you're lucky. Rocks, if you're not. Your body bounces, scrapes, bruises along every cobblestone as the town watches you arrive like an overdue delivery of pain. Once at the scaffold, you are hanged not to death, because that would be merciful and this is not. You're hoisted just high enough to strangle, to feel your windpipe collapse inward like a soggy flute. Your legs kick, your vision narrows, your bladder lets go. You don't die. That's important. The executioner cuts the rope while your heart is still bravely pretending it can make it out of this. Then comes the disembowelment. You're laid out, limbs pinned, breathing in broken sobs. As the real show begins, the executioner, who may or may not have bathed this week, slices open your abdomen with a dull knife. He reaches in, barehanded, and starts removing things you didn't even know you had. Intestines, stomach, maybe a slice of liver for the crowd. These parts are tossed into a fire beside you while you're still alive enough to smell your own cooking. Then comes the symbolic bit, your genitals are cut off. Sometimes before the disemboweling, sometimes after. It depends on the crowd. The point is humiliation. A declaration that your legacy ends here, no sons, no bloodline, no dignity. You're not just dying, you're being erased. If you're somehow still clinging to life, the next part takes care of that. Your head is chopped off with a cleaver that's more accustomed to splitting logs than necks. Clean cuts are rare. It might take more than one swing. Some reports describe the head's twitching post-decapitation. Whether that's nerves or divine protest, no one knows. No one cares. The final act is quartering. Your limbs are severed, 2 arms, 2 legs, separated like a child's grotesque marionette, and your body is butchered into pieces. These are salted, sometimes boiled, and sent on tour. Yes, really. Your head is mounted on a pike atop London Bridge. The rest of you, your arms, legs, maybe some bonus ribs, are displayed across the kingdom at busy crossroads or city gates. The idea is deterrence. Look at what happens to traitors. Look long. Look hard. But here's the twist, you don't need to actually commit treason. Treason is elastic. In 14th century England, speaking ill of the king, counterfeiting coins, or accidentally dreaming about insurrection could earn you a one-way trip to the meat display. It happened to William Wallace. It happened to Guy Fawkes. It nearly happened to anyone who looked at a royal the wrong way and lacked noble blood to shield them. This wasn't punishment, it was propaganda. A state-sponsored horror film played out in blood and smoke, designed to keep everyone else obedient. It's legal theater, and you're both the actor and the stage prop. And the worst part? It worked. For centuries. No rebellion succeeded. The king's peace was enforced through terror, spectacle, and the promise that if you dared to speak out, your very bones would become billboards. So next time you think medieval England was all lute music and goblets of mead, remember this. Justice wasn't blind. It was creatively sadistic, endorsed by law, and very, very public. And you were one poorly timed rumor away from starring in the kingdom's next big disembowelment premiere. Imagine being sentenced to death and discovering that you won't just be killed, you'll be methodically turned into a sculpture of shattered humanity. No quick drop, no guillotine grace. Instead, welcome to the breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel, a device engineered not only to kill but to do so slowly, painfully, and with the cruel artistry of a culture that saw suffering as public policy. You are led into the town square, wrists bound, legs bare, surrounded by a crowd that's not just present, they are excited. Children sit on shoulders. Vendors sell bread. The priest offers last rites while side-eyeing your soul's potential direction. In front of you stands the wheel, a massive wooden cartwheel mounted horizontally or vertically depending on local traditions and the executioner's mood. It's not symbolic. It's your fate. The executioner approaches, wielding an iron bar roughly the size of a grown man's regret. You are strapped across the spokes of the wheel, limbs spread, bones exposed beneath thin skin like kindling before a storm. Then, the beating begins. Methodically, the executioner brings down the bar on your limbs, once for each bone, carefully spaced, like a chef cracking lobster for maximum yield. Your radius. Snap. Your ulna. Crack. Your femur. Shatter. Tibia. Fibula. Rinse. Repeat. The goal is not immediate death. The goal is to reduce you to a pile of functioning pain, to mangle the body until it no longer resembles a person, but still holds onto life. Limbs are bent unnaturally around the spokes. Twisted like dough, tied down to prevent even the mercy of spasms. You don't scream anymore. You rasp. And the crowd. They cheer. Or gasp. Or pray. But they don't stop watching. Because this is what justice looks like in a world without anesthetic or empathy. Your mangled body is then hoisted atop a pole. Wheel and all, raised like a banner for the crime you committed: murder, theft, heresy, treason, sometimes just being poor and unlucky. You are left there, still alive if God hates you that much, to die of shock, thirst, or exposure. Birds come. They peck. Bugs settle in. Rain turns your bruises into rot. And all the while, the wheel creaks in the wind, a weather vane of state-sponsored cruelty. In some regions, there's a mercy blow, a final strike to the chest or neck, administered after all limbs are broken. In others, mercy is withheld, because the suffering is the point. The wheel isn't just punishment. It's advertisement. A deterrent sculpted in broken ribs and torn sinew. A warning nailed to the sky. But like all legal horror shows, it's also entertainment. Townspeople attend these executions like festivals. They bring picnics, date each other under the scent of dying men, and go home bragging about how long the latest victim lasted. Some took hours. Others, days. One poor soul, according to 18th century reports, lived for over 3 days on the wheel, his body a map of splintered despair, visited by gawking crowds and finally finished by a guard with a spear out of boredom. Or pity. The wheel was used for centuries across Europe, from Germany to France to Sweden. It was reserved for the worst crimes or the most political ones. The message was clear: if you cross the law, your punishment will not be swift or silent. It will be loud, long, and lifted high for everyone to see. Over time, the wheel fell out of fashion. Enlightenment thinkers began to question the morality of making torture a civic hobby. By the 19th century, it was largely abandoned. But the memory lingered. A tool so violent, it carved itself into the language. Today, to break someone on the wheel means total, irreversible destruction. And once, it was literal. You were the message. You were the warning. You were the bones. Left to bleach in the sun while your soul tried to forget what your body endured. You've been found guilty of treason. Or perhaps your crime was murdering a parent, maybe just offending the emperor's aesthetic sensibilities. It hardly matters now. The sentence has been declared, Lin Kai. Death by 1,000 cuts. A punishment so surgically sadistic it remained legal for over a millennium in imperial China. This is not execution. This is deconstruction. It begins in the square. You are tied to a wooden frame, upright, legs and arms bound in a grotesque parody of balance. Around you, the crowd assembles. Men, women, children, merchants, monks. Not for justice. For theater. You don't wear a blindfold. You're not granted dignity. The whole point of Lin Kai is that you watch yourself vanish. The executioner steps forward, blade in hand. Not a heavy sword for clean death, but a small knife, razor sharp, meant for detail. He's a specialist. Trained in how to take a human body apart while keeping it painfully alive. The first cut is theatrical, a slice across the chest, shallow, designed not to kill but to shock. Blood wells up, but it's just the beginning. Next, the executioner targets muscle. He moves to the arms, thighs, removing strips of flesh with clinical precision. The crowd watches in reverent horror. Each cut draws more blood, more screams, more approval. Some flinch. Others cheer. You begin to shake, not from pain alone, but from the knowledge that you will not be allowed to die yet. In a Western execution, the goal is death. Here, death is a consequence. The goal is dissolution. Your body is made of components, and Lin Kai removes them like a chef dismembering a meal. Fingers, toes, nose, ears, cheeks, nipples, genitals, all become offerings to a crowd conditioned to believe that ultimate crimes deserve ultimate suffering. The executioner is paid by the cut. More cuts, more coin. He spaces them strategically, inflicting agony without reaching vital organs until he is permitted to. Historically, the number of cuts varied. Some executions ended after a few dozen. Others, like the infamous case of Liu Jin in 1510, were extended to nearly 3,000 cuts. Eyewitnesses say he remained alive for the first 1,000. Breathing, bleeding, staring. Eventually, the body gives out. Blood loss, shock, internal collapse. But not before the face is stripped to bone, the limbs unrecognizable, and the person beneath the skin erased. Death is not a moment here. It is a process, a performance staged by the state and sanctioned by divine authority. Confucian ideology demanded reverence for the body. Mutilation in death meant spiritual disintegration. So Lin Kai wasn't just corporal punishment. It was metaphysical annihilation. You didn't just die. You lost your afterlife. Your ancestors couldn't find you. You were denied reincarnation, cursed to roam the spirit world in fragments. Even your family suffered. In many cases, their status was lowered, their property confiscated, their names disgraced. Lin Kai turned your death into a legacy of shame. This form of punishment was often reserved for those the emperor wanted erased politically, culturally, spiritually. The act was recorded in detail, sometimes illustrated, and circulated as state propaganda. It was a warning carved in flesh, loyalty or obliteration. By the early 20th century, global condemnation and internal reformers pressured China to abandon Lin Kai. It was officially outlawed in 1905. But the memory lingers. Photographs survive. Etchings. Testimonies. Evidence that humans once believed. The best way to punish betrayal was to reduce a person to suffering geometry in public. You weren't just killed. You were unmade, cut from history, cut from memory, cut from yourself. There is no screaming in this punishment. Not because it's painless, but because the screaming makes it worse. You've been accused, heresy, witchcraft, blasphemy, or worst of all, being a woman who said something inconvenient. The tribunal has deliberated for 15 entire minutes, half of which were spent sharpening the tools. You are found guilty. The sentence is swift. Bring out the pear. It sounds harmless. It even looks like fruit, vaguely. A small metal object, shaped like a bulb, made of 4 steel petals joined at the base and hinged to open like a flower from hell. The executioner inserts it into your mouth. Or if you're accused of sodomy, into the rectum. Or if you're a woman charged with illicit sexuality or speaking out of turn, into the vagina. The location depends on your crime. The result is always the same. Once inserted, the screw at the base is turned. Slowly. Deliberately. The petals begin to open. One by one. Gradually. They expand, stretching the cavity beyond its limit. There is no quick rupture. Just pressure. Bone against metal. Nerves screaming inside your skull. Your jaw dislocates first. Then the palate splits. Your teeth crack like stones under frost. The pain doesn't spike, it expands, like a fire eating through dry brush. Your voice, if it emerges at all, is a gurgle. A whimper. Blood drips. Not splattered like in some dramatic execution, but seeping, steady, humiliating. This is not designed to kill. That would be merciful. This is meant to silence. If you're lucky, you pass out. If not, the device is removed, sometimes after full expansion, sometimes midway through, depending on whether they want to reuse it or not. There is no cleaning between uses. No disinfection. The last user's infection becomes your bonus round. If your jaw doesn't heal right, you'll never speak again. If your pelvis fractures, you won't walk without pain. If your throat is permanently damaged, good. That's the point. This is not about justice. It's about deterrence. You're not being punished for what you did. You're being converted into a symbol, proof that speaking against the church, the crown, or your husband's incompetence is anatomically unsafe. The pair of anguish was never an official state device. It existed in the shadowy overlap between legal execution and social control. Used by inquisitors, rogue judges, private torturers. It doesn't appear often in court records, but shows up in illustrations, confession manuals, and whispered stories told to terrify disobedient daughters. Historians debate how widespread it really was. Some think it was more myth than practice. Others point to its presence in museums and surviving examples in torture collections across Europe. Real or not, it worked because people believed it existed. And in history, belief often shapes behavior more than reality. The pair's true. Horror isn't mechanical. It's philosophical. It represents a time when silence was more valuable than truth. When the body could be forced into compliance. When fear of mutilation was a legitimate legal strategy. Today, it sits behind glass in dusty exhibits labeled medieval torture device. Tourists gawk. Children giggle. But the silence it enforced still echoes, because once you know a society invented this tool not to kill but to deform, you realize just how far humans have gone to protect the powerful from being questioned. Your trial lasted 5 minutes. Your crime: theft, sedition, or perhaps just existing in the wrong place while being poor, foreign, or uncomfortably female. It doesn't really matter. The verdict was predetermined. The sentence: torture, not for information, not even for confession, but for demonstration. The device they bring out is deceptively simple. It looks like a gardening tool, a metal claw with 4 sharp hooks, each curved like a vulture's beak. This is the Spanish tickler. And no, it's not used for tickling. It's used for flaying flesh. You're tied to a wall, arms raised, or maybe to a post in the public square if they want to make a proper afternoon of it. Your shirt is ripped open. Modesty is not a concern. They want skin. Fresh, unscarred skin that can be converted into spectacle. The torturer steps forward, armed with the tickler, which is not heated, not sharpened, not dipped in anything dramatic. Just cold, rusty iron, designed to do one thing very well: shred. The first strike lands across your chest. 4 iron claws rake down your torso, catching skin and pulling it in strips. There's no finesse here. No surgical precision. Just brute force and repetition. Again and again, the tickler is drawn across your flesh, back, shoulders, thighs, belly. The pain is immediate, bright, and primal. You scream, naturally. That's encouraged. This isn't a quiet punishment. It's supposed to be heard, supposed to echo down cobbled streets and through the dreams of anyone considering petty rebellion. Blood pours. Not in cinematic jets, but in thick dribbles, down your sides, soaking your legs, pooling at your feet. The tickler doesn't kill. It maims. Permanently. Scars for life, if you live long enough to collect them. Muscles tear. Nerves scream. Infections wait patiently in every rust flake and fly. If you collapse, you are hauled upright. If you faint, you are revived. There is no dignity. Only damage. The Spanish tickler wasn't uniquely Spanish. Versions existed throughout Europe, from Germany to Italy, under names like the cat's paw or iron claw. It was a working-class punishment, favored for its low maintenance and high terror quotient. No fancy machinery, no expensive setup. Just a torturer, a victim, and a crowd. Sometimes it was used alongside other devices: whips, the rack, fire. Sometimes it was the main act. Often it was reserved for women accused of adultery, heresy, or witchcraft. Their nakedness added to the humiliation. The message was always the same: pain is policy. The tickler did not discriminate by accuracy. It tore skin from bone, sometimes taking chunks of flesh so large that bone showed through. Survivors were rare, but they existed, walking warnings wrapped in scar tissue, condemned to live with the memory of justice by claw. If you think medieval justice was blind, think again. It was tactile, intimate, and left very visible marks. The Spanish tickler didn't just punish the guilty. It curated fear, broadcast pain, and taught entire villages that obedience is cheaper than skin. And when the work was done, the tool was washed, if at all, hung back on the wall beside the chains and branding irons, waiting for the next body to make an example of. There's a large cauldron in the center of the square. That's your first clue this isn't going to end well. You're dragged from the prison barefoot, filthy, and shackled, past a crowd already gathering to witness your transformation from criminal to cuisine. Your crime? Poisoning, usually. It was considered especially treacherous, killing without showing your face, a murder without a duel. Kings hated it. Commoners feared it. So they invented a punishment that mirrored the crime. Slow, creeping, internal. The sentence, boiling. Not metaphorical. Literal. They march you to the iron pot, large enough to hold a man, and hoist it over a fire already crackling with anticipation. Some versions used water. Others preferred oil, pitch, or molten lead, depending on the budget and the level of theatrical flair. The pot is not at a boil yet. That's intentional. The execution doesn't start with the scream. It starts with the weight. You're either lowered in via ropes, ankles first, or thrown in at the torso, depending on local custom and sadistic creativity. The pain doesn't hit all at once. It creeps. First, your feet burn, skin tightening, blistering, cooking like meat on a slow roast. Then your legs. You thrash, but there's nowhere to go. Your hands are bound, your body contorted, your screams echoing off stone walls while steam rises around you like a demonic baptism. If you're unlucky, they lower you in slowly, a few inches at a time, letting each new surface of your skin meet the scalding liquid like a cruel introduction to death. It takes minutes. Long ones. Long enough for the crowd to react, some cover their faces, others cheer, most just watch. This isn't punishment. It's performance art. The idea was not just to kill, but to terrify everyone watching. Let them see what slow justice looks like. Let them smell it. Hear it. Remember it. Under Henry VIII, boiling was codified into English law for poisoners. In 1531, a man named Richard Roos, a cook accused of poisoning porridge intended for a bishop, was boiled alive in Smithfield. Eyewitnesses said he roared in agony, his flesh sloughing from bone, steam filling the air. It wasn't quick. It wasn't clean. It was exactly the point. Boiling wasn't limited to England. It appears in records from France, Germany, and even parts of Asia. Always the same principles: a trader's death for a trader's crime, and one that everyone in town could attend. It was legal, endorsed, methodical. Not rage, ritual. And when it ended, it didn't really end. The cauldron didn't disappear. It was cleaned, barely, then stored for future use. A municipal asset, like a tax ledger or a pillory. Sometimes it stood in public view as a deterrent. Walk past it on your way to market. Think about what happens if you get clever with your cousin's wine. The threat lingered long after the steam cleared. So next time you imagine medieval justice as nothing more than heads on spikes, remember the pot. Remember the sizzle of law. An order in its most literal form. You didn't just die. You boiled. And they made sure everyone knew it. You are lying flat on your back, wrists and ankles bound with coarse rope, spread like a starfish on the worst bed ever made. The wooden frame beneath you groans with anticipation. This is the rack. And it's about to introduce your joints too. The concept of irreversible betrayal. The torture approaches, not in a hurry, because there's no need to rush when your instrument is a machine designed to dislocate a person 1 inch at a time. At either end of the rack are rollers, turned by cranks. One crank pulls your arms upward, the other your legs downward. You might be offered a last chance to confess. If you say nothing or say the wrong thing, the cranks begin to turn. Slowly. Deliberately. The tension starts small. A tug in your shoulders. A stretch in your thighs. It doesn't feel fatal yet. But then the muscles begin to scream, and the real work begins. The rack doesn't snap bones. Not immediately. It pulls. It tears. It lengthens your body past its design specs. Tendons snap like violin strings. Ligaments stretch until they fray. Shoulders pop free of their sockets with an audible clunk. Hips dislocate. Knees give out. Your spine bends. Your jaw clenches. Your screams turn to hoarse sobs, then to silence when the pain exceeds what language can carry. The goal isn't to kill you. Not yet. The rack is an extraction tool. It's used to get confessions, names, information, real or imagined. Truth is irrelevant. The state already knows what you did. They just want you to say it out loud so they can write it down and sleep easy. In England, it was known as the Duke of Exeter's daughter, named after the nobleman who allegedly introduced it. In Spain, it was used during the Inquisition. In France, it was the Chevalier. No matter the name, the effect was the same, a body stretched like taffy, broken without blood, disassembled in silence. Some victims survived. Barely. Their arms left permanently useless, shoulders fused incorrectly, joints prone to collapse. They were let go, if they were lucky, as walking warnings, proof that the state doesn't need knives to destroy you. Just wood, rope, and time. Others died. Days later from internal bleeding, nerve damage, or infection. And some confessed mid-stretch, screaming names to make the cranking stop, implicating friends, family, or strangers just to be spared another inch. That's the rack's real power. It doesn't just destroy bodies. It destroys trust. Community. Resistance. It makes truth pliable, stretchable, like your limbs. Under the rack, everyone talks eventually. Or they break. And often, they do both. It was phased out over time as modern legal systems decided that mutilation was bad optics. But its legacy persists in language, in fear, in the understanding that pain can be weaponized so precisely, so surgically, that a man will confess to anything just to feel whole again. On the rack, you are not just punished. You are unmade. Reassembled as an example, your silence stretched into a scream, your truth bent into whatever shape the crank demands. You're sentenced, not just to die, but to be held, embraced, even, by a symbol of pain dressed up in the illusion of solemn dignity. They call it the Iron Maiden, and no, it's not a band or a metaphor. It's a standing sarcophagus, man-shaped. Made of metal and lined on the inside with long, slender spikes. You're marched up to it. The front is open, inviting in a grotesque sort of way, the way a coffin yawns or a mouth smiles before it bites. You don't walk in. You're pushed. The interior is dark, but your eyes adjust just in time to see. What's waiting? Steel spikes, spaced precisely so as not to kill you quickly. The door begins to close. Slowly. This is not meant to be efficient. As the gap narrows, the spikes press inward, first against your arms, your chest, your shins. You try to hold your breath as if that could shrink you. It doesn't matter. The door shuts completely. You're upright, impaled, but not pierced through the heart. The spikes are too clever for that. They avoid the vitals. Barely. You don't die right away. You bleed. You suffer. You breathe hot, stale air laced with iron and panic. Inside. It's silent, save for your own heartbeat hammering against punctured ribs. Sometimes the victim was left in the Iron Maiden for hours, sometimes days, bleeding out slowly, their body too wounded to live, too impaled to move. Some reports claim the spikes were angled to direct blood downward into a drain. Efficient. Elegant, even, in its cruelty. But here's the catch, the Iron Maiden likely wasn't real. Or at least, not used in the way people imagine. Most historians agree it was a myth, a 19th century invention passed off as medieval horror. Early examples of the device appeared In museums filled with fabricated tortures, curated to satisfy the Victorian appetite for macabre spectacle. The first known reference dates to the 18th century, centuries after the Middle Ages supposedly employed it. But that doesn't matter. Because belief is power, and for hundreds of years, the Iron Maiden was believed to be real. Artists drew it. Writers described it. Audiences imagined it in nightmares, and governments whispered about it in books of punishment and law. Its image haunted the imagination, a punishment so precise, so coldly impersonal, that death came wrapped in steel, decorated like a human, and kissed you gently as it killed. It was never just a device. It was a metaphor made flesh, or rather, made metal. It represented a legal system where appearances mattered more than facts, where pain could be mechanized, automated, hidden behind a closed door, away from witnesses, and dismissed as procedure. Whether or not it was ever truly used, the Iron Maiden is one of history's most enduring lies, a perfect torture that may never have spilled a single drop of blood but terrified generations all the same. You didn't need to see one to fear it. You just needed to know someone who said they saw it. And once that image entered your mind, a man-sized coffin of spikes, a silent death, there was no forgetting it. Real or not, it worked. You are marched through the city barefoot, hands bound, under a sky that feels too bright for what is about to happen. The streets are lined with spectators. Some spit. Some whisper prayers. Others just stare, because impalement is not a private act. It is a spectacle, a theater of anatomy and authority, and you are its unwilling star. At the center of the square stands a stake, long, sharpened, sometimes graced, always terrible. This is no ordinary punishment. This is impalement. And it's not here to send you to death. It's here to drag you through it. The process begins with positioning. 2 executioners hold your arms. Another, your legs. You are stripped naked, not for humiliation, though there's plenty of that, but for practicality. Fabric slows the process. Then comes the insertion. The stake, tapered at the end, is pressed against your rectum or vagina, or in some accounts, directly into the abdomen. There's no anesthesia. There's not even speed. They raise you slowly, letting the weight of your own body pull you down onto the stake. If done properly, the stake misses vital organs. That's the goal. If it hits the heart or lungs, it's over too quickly. Done right, the stake winds upward through your body, past the intestines, between ribs, sometimes emerging through the chest, shoulder, or mouth. There are cases where it exited through the throat. The most skilled executioners could impale a man in such a way that he remained alive for hours, even days. Vlad III of Wallachia, the one they called Vlad the Impaler, turned this international policy in the 15th century. Thousands were impaled during his reign, their bodies lining roads for miles, each one a rotting signpost that said, obey or ascend. Foreign dignitaries wrote of forests of the dead, of Turkish envoys left writhing on stakes as birds nested in their hair. But Vlad wasn't alone. The Ottomans, the Persians, the Assyrians, they all had variations. Impalement was global. You were lifted upright, the stake planted firmly in the earth, and left to sway in the wind, twitching, shrieking, bleeding from every orifice. Eventually, the blood loss, organ failure, or sheer shock killed you. Sometimes crows came first. Insects always came. The smell drew them like mourners. Death was not a moment. It was a landscape. And your body became part of it. This punishment was reserved for enemies of the state, traitors, blasphemers, those who needed not just to die, but to be transformed into warnings. Impalement was not just about pain. It was about display. A man on a stake becomes more than a corpse. He becomes a message, unignorable, unerasable, carved into the horizon. In some cases, impaled bodies were left until they rotted to bone. No burial. No closure. Just a slow collapse under sun and rain, until only the stake remained, rising from the ground like a cruel memory. Today, impalement seems impossibly grotesque. But for centuries, it was law. It was order. It was what happened when you lost the game of power. You didn't just fall. You rose inch by excruciating inch, until death finally caught up with your gravity. They hang you upside down first. That's how you know it's going to be bad. Your legs are tied at the ankles and hoisted high, your head dangling just above the earth, your arms bound tightly behind your back. Blood rushes to your head. Your face swells. Breathing becomes shallow. But this is not the torture. This is the prelude. Because what's coming next is the saw. It's long, two-handled, the kind used for cutting timber. Except today, the only wood is the frame holding your body aloft. The saw is placed between your legs. You begin to scream before it even moves. They start sawing not through wood, but through flesh, through bone, through the soft tissue between your thighs. Slowly. Very slowly. The upside-down position isn't just for spectacle. It keeps you alive longer. The blood drains away from the wound, pooling in your brain, delaying unconsciousness. You stay awake. Aware. Feeling everything. The blade grinds through your groin. You convulse. Muscles tear. Bones splinter. You scream until your throat bleeds. The crowd watches. Always a crowd. They murmur, gasp, cheer, depending on the culture. And the crime. In some places, it's punishment for adultery, in others for theft or heresy. The rationale changes. The suffering does not. The saw continues downward. Through the pelvis. Into the abdomen. Some executions stopped at the navel, the executioners letting the body fall in halves. Others continued until the body was fully bisected. If your luck is rotten and your heart is strong, you might stay conscious halfway down. A few minutes of unbelievable pain. A lifetime's worth packed into one grotesque finale. The worst part is that this wasn't considered extraordinary. Sawing was a legal punishment in various regions of the medieval world. It appeared in the Islamic caliphates, the Mongol Empire, and European territories, always with the same brutal logic: don't just kill, warn. Make an example. Make people remember. This wasn't a secret act in a dark dungeon. This was public, performed in marketplaces, town squares, the steps of mosques or cathedrals. It wasn't justice. It was a message. Cross the law, and you won't just die. You'll be unmade. Lengthwise. There are historical records, religious legends, and travelers' accounts describing sawing. Some are undoubtedly exaggerated, mythicized. Over centuries. But the consistency across cultures and centuries suggests this horror was real. Too real. Too effective. Eventually, as public executions declined and torture fell out of legal fashion, sawing disappeared from courts. Not because people grew kinder, just more discreet. But the image remained. A man dangling, saw biting deeper, crowds watching with a mix of awe and nausea. And you, suspended upside down, reduced inch by inch to nothing but a memory carved in pain. You're caught, judged, and sentenced. Not to death, though that would be a mercy, but to something older than most gods and far more intimate. You are to be flayed. Not executed. Unwrapped. One layer at a time. The process begins in a public square, or a battlefield, or the palace steps. Wherever witnesses are plentiful. You are stripped naked and tied upright to a pole or laid face down across a frame. Movement is not an option. Dignity never was. The executioner appears with a small, sharp knife, curved, hooked, made for precision. This isn't about gore. It's about control. The first incision is at the wrist or shoulder. A slit just deep enough to sever the skin. Then the edge is worked beneath the flesh, lifting it like parchment. Slowly, deliberately, the skin is peeled away. Arms first. Then the back. Then the legs. The pain is indescribable, a full body fire fed by every nerve ending. Your skin, the barrier that holds you together, is being turned into a flag. You writhe. You scream. You beg. It doesn't stop. If the executioner is skilled, and they always are, you'll remain alive for most of it. Conscious. Shaking. Drenched in blood and fear. Death comes late. Maybe through shock. Maybe infection. Maybe blood loss. But not before your face is stripped, your chest exposed, and your body rendered raw. In ancient Assyria, flaying was used to punish rebels. The king's enemies were nailed to walls, their skins tacked beside them as warnings. In Persia, the practice was refined. Some were flayed post-mortem as an additional insult. Others weren't so lucky. In medieval Europe, heretics and traitors met the same fate, punishment made memorable through spectacle. Sometimes the flayed skin was stuffed and displayed. Sometimes it was just left to rot. Either way, it sent a clear message: betray the crown, the gods, or the state, and you will be erased in layers. Symbolically, flaying went deeper than pain. It wasn't just punishment. It was dehumanization. Your very surface, your identity, was removed. You didn't just die. You dissolved. There are ancient murals depicting this. Eyewitness accounts. Even preserved pieces of human skin used in rituals or warnings. And while the practice faded as torture went underground, the metaphor endured. Flaying became a literary device. A symbol in nightmares. A method so vile it barely needed to be real anymore. The fear was enough. So when you think of justice, remember that it wasn't always blind. Sometimes it looked you in the eyes while it turned you inside out. And your crime didn't need to be grand. Just being the wrong person in the wrong time could be enough to find yourself stripped of everything: clothing, protection, skin, humanity. You're not led to a scaffold or a dungeon. You're led to a statue. A gleaming bronze bull, life-sized, hollow, and anatomically correct. Its flanks glint in the sunlight, polished and menacing, an offering to cruelty disguised as art. This is the brazen bull, an invention of ancient Sicily, and it is where your life ends, not with a blade, but with heat. The creator, a man named Perillos, designed it for a tyrant named Phalaris. It was marketed as an innovation in execution, a more civilized alternative to the usual hacking and stabbing. A technological advancement in pain. You are stripped and forced inside through a small door in the bull's side. The space is tight, dark, airless. You crouch, pressed against the cold metal. Then the door is shut, bolted, sealed. Outside, a fire is lit beneath the bull's belly. Slowly, the metal begins to warm. You feel it first through your feet, then your hands, then everywhere. The air grows thick. Your skin begins to prickle, then sting, then blister. The bronze heats evenly, deliberately, converting the interior into a baking chamber. You're not just cooking. You're roasting. Your lungs scorch. Your eyes boil. Your screams echo off the walls, but here's the true horror. The brazen bull is engineered with a system of pipes and valves that convert your screams into the sound of a bellowing bull. Its acoustics as sadism. To the crowd outside, you're not crying. You're mooing. Phalaris watches, pleased. The people cheer. It's not just an execution. It's entertainment. The smell of burning flesh escapes through vents disguised as nostrils. The sound continues, long, guttural, animal. Inside, you are dying by degrees. Your skin chars. Your muscles seize. You bake alive, reduced to smoke and screams and then silence. The door is opened only after the fire is extinguished and the metal cools. What remains is a blackened husk, fused to the walls, sometimes indistinguishable from the bronze itself. You've become part of the art. According to legend, the first person to die in the bull was its inventor. Perillos, so proud of his creation, demonstrated its features to Phalaris, who then had him thrown inside to test the product personally. Irony, molten and cruel. The brazen bull was not a widespread tool. It was rare, elite, used by tyrants and conquerors to send a very specific message: power is creative, and it can kill you beautifully. Later historians debated whether it was real or propaganda, but archaeological fragments and written accounts suggest it existed. Even if it hadn't, the idea alone was enough to terrify. A furnace in the shape of life. A scream turned into music. A death so stylized it mocked you in stereo. This was not about guilt or innocence. It was about spectacle. About turning execution into a symphony of agony. And once the fire was lit, there was no escape. You didn't just burn. You performed. You're strapped to a table, wrists bound above your head, ankles tied tight. You're not bleeding. Not yet. This isn't that kind of punishment. Not at first. The tools brought before you aren't whips or blades. Just a clay pot. A torch. And a rat. One rat. Live, twitching, confused. The executioner places the rat on your bare abdomen. The pot goes over it, upside down, trapping the animal against your skin. Then they start heating the pot. Slowly. The flame licks the clay. The rat panics. It scrambles. It claws. And then it starts digging. Because the only way out is down. Into you. The creature gnaws, scrapes, tears into your flesh with teeth. Designed to chew through bone and wire. It doesn't care about justice or guilt. It wants out. And you? You're the escape route. Pain explodes across your stomach. Your skin splits. Blood flows. You scream, but no one stops it. Because this is the point. This is rat torture. A technique so simple, so primitive, it appears independently across civilizations. The Chinese used it. The Spanish Inquisition refined it. Even 20th century regimes dabbled with variations. Why? Because it works. It bypasses resistance, bypasses bravery, goes straight for instinct. The rat doesn't stop. It burrows deeper. Into muscle. Toward organs. You can feel it move. Writhing inside you. A living blade. If you're lucky, you pass out. If you're not, you remain conscious as it tunnels through your body, leaving a trail of shredded tissue. Sometimes the goal was information. Confess, or they'll add another rat. Sometimes it was punishment. A sentence delivered through squeals and claw marks. Always it was psychological warfare. Death might not come immediately. Infection often followed. Septic shock. Organ failure. And if they removed the rat in time, you'd live, but never clean. Never whole. Because no matter how deep the wound, the real damage is mental. You'll never forget the feeling of something alive beneath your skin. The helplessness. The betrayal by your own body. And the knowledge that someone thought of this. Invented it. Practiced it. Rat torture didn't require Iron Maidens or racks. Just a pot, a flame, and a lack of empathy. It was favored by those who wanted control without spectacle. Horror without headlines. The kind of pain that doesn't scar the skin so much as the soul. You weren't just being punished. You were being hollowed. From the inside out. You're led into a chamber that smells of sweat, iron, and something worse, shame soaked into wood over decades of repetition. At the center of the room is the Judas cradle, a triangular wooden seat mounted on a post, the top shaped into a sharp point. It stands about waist high, stable, silent, waiting. You are stripped naked. Not just for humiliation, but for access. Your wrists are tied behind your back. Your ankles are shackled and weighted. The executioners hoist you into the air with a system of pulleys. You dangle for a moment, suspended like meat on a hook, staring down at the pointed tip of the cradle. Then, slowly, they lower you. Inch by inch, gravity does its work. The tip enters your anus or vagina, depending on your sex, your crime, and the mood of the tribunal. There is no penetration in the romantic sense. This is invasion, cold and splintered. The point does not pierce flesh. Not at first. It stretches. Spreads. Splits. The weight of your own body becomes the executioner, forcing you downward, impaling you not in a burst, but over hours, sometimes days. The pain is total. Not sharp like a cut, but crushing, relentless. Muscles tear. Internal tissue rips. The body protests with blood, sweat, and uncontrollable tremors. You can't shift your weight. You're tied. You can't cry for help. You already did. No one came. The Judas cradle isn't about death. It's about degradation. A punishment that turns anatomy against itself. It was used for heretics, political enemies, anyone the church or the state wanted to break. And break it did. It left no elegant wounds. No noble martyrdom. Just infections, permanent internal damage, sepsis, and psychological ruin. Sometimes they added movement, rocking the victim back and forth, twisting them slightly, driving the point deeper. Other times they poured oil or fire onto the seat to speed up the damage. It wasn't designed to kill, but it often did. Slowly. Screaming. Alone. Few records survive because it was rarely a matter of public record. This wasn't spectacle like the wheel or boiling. This was utility. Efficiency. Torture dressed up as interrogation. There are reproductions in museums today, awkward wooden pyramids that look almost comical until you imagine sitting on one. Not for a moment. For hours. Days. With your life unraveling from the inside out. This was not punishment for crime. It was punishment for defiance. For daring to hold a thought unapproved by clergy or crown. And when it ended, it didn't. Survivors didn't walk away. They limped. They leaked. They carried the shape of the cradle inside them forever, a phantom pain sharper than the original wood. The Judas cradle didn't just silence bodies. It silenced futures. And in the end, that was the point. Congratulations. You've made it to the end, through metal jaws and inverted bones, through burning bulls and rats' bellies, through silence split by iron and voices shredded on the wheel. You survived history's legal imagination. Just barely. If there's one thing that unites humanity across centuries, it's this: when power feels threatened, it doesn't just react. It performs. Justice, historically, hasn't meant fairness. It meant spectacle. Theater of agony. Pain as policy. Every punishment you've just read was not a glitch in some otherwise enlightened society. It was the system functioning exactly as intended. Designed not only to kill, but to shape behavior, create fear, reinforce hierarchy. Whether it was Rome, Ming China, Tudor England, or Ottoman Constantinople, the message was the same: you do not matter. The state does. Your body is currency, your suffering is statecraft, and your death is marketing. And yet, here you are. Reading this. Breathing. Whole. You don't have to worry about waking up to find yourself sewn inside a brazen statue. No one is likely to strap you to a wheel to turn your ribs into musical notes. You live in the age of laws, of rights, of appeals. Mostly. Hopefully. For now. But remember, none of these tortures disappeared because people got kinder. They vanished. Because fear found better disguises. Subtler methods. Paperwork instead of whips. Algorithms instead of executioners. The Iron Maiden may be gone. The silence it enforced. Still echoing. So the next time you feel history tugging at your sleeve, whispering that things were better, simpler, purer in the past, don't look back with nostalgia. Look back with your whole spine intact. Because if you'd been born in almost any other time, in almost any other place, you wouldn't have lasted a day. You would have lasted just long enough to die creatively. And publicly. And that, ironically, is the one thing you and power have always agreed on: the show must go on.